Good morning. As you can tell by my voice, I'm Mrs. Daniels, and our assembly today is a celebration of World Book Day, which is Thursday, 3rd of March. Thinking back to your time in primary school, you can all probably remember dressing up as your favourite book character to celebrate the day. And as well as being created to celebrate both books and their authors, World Book Day drew attention to the fact that 90% of children in the world's poorest countries are unable to read a basic book by the age of 10. Now this is compared to the richer countries in the world, where the figure is only 9%. One of the main reasons for this terrible statistic is that many children in poorer countries do not have or only have limited access to books. And this is something we cannot begin to imagine in our country of well-stocked bookshops, of libraries and Amazon Prime. Here in the UK, we've been publishing books for over 500 years, and that's all thanks to William Caxton, who invented the printing press all those years ago. Books can help you experiencing things that you may never be able to experience yourself, by taking you on a journey with the characters where you see and feel everything they do. And here are a couple of favourites from Mrs. Sharman and myself.
So the first book that I wanted to talk about is Goodnight, Mr. Tom. It's a book which I originally read about in school, and it was because I was very interested in the evacuees and how a young, vulnerable person might have felt having to, go away from their family home and go to a stranger's home. And this book absolutely hooked me. And I think what I love about it is that Mr. Tom, who was really very a lonely man, he took in Willie, the evacuee, and he didn't really want him to start off with. Willie came from quite an abusive family, and he really was quite vulnerable. And Mr. Tom saw that in him and actually really sort of basically, brought the best out of him, but also Willie brought the best out of Tom. And it was such a happy ending in the end that I felt so drawn into the characters, because the fact that they both mutually benefited from this relationship, and it was pushed upon them, but actually in the end it turned out to be so positive. So that's Goodnight, Mr. Tom. So I recommend that one.
I think, as we were saying, it's really hard to choose just a couple of books. I mean, I could go on for hours about books, but I won't. But one I did choose was Dave Grohl, the storyteller, because one of my dreams was to actually be a guitar player fronting a rock band. Believe it or not, that's what I really, really wanted to do. But my guitar playing, sadly, was never that great. So by reading this, the Foo Fighters are one of my greatest bands. I love them. I love Nirvana. So for me, it was really taking a step into their lives and what it was like, or what it is like, because he's still playing now. To actually be in front of millions of people, to actually tour the world, and what kind of level you have to be to actually front a band. And actually the answer is you don't have to be that great, which was really, in two parts, frustrating and really interesting, because they certainly weren't fabulous guitarists when they started. So for all you budding guitarists out there, take a leaf out of that book. It's never too late. So Dave Grohl, storyteller, great read.
And my next book is The Little Coffee Shop of Kabul. And I love this book. And the reason I love it so much is about 5 women that come together under very, very difficult atrocities of Afghanistan war. They're in the capital city, Kabul. And it's very, very difficult being a woman in Afghanistan anyway. But the 5 women form an alliance. And that friendship is so, so strong. And I suppose the reason why I think it resonated with me is the fact that friendships really matter to me. I've got some really good friends who I value greatly, and they keep me sane, and I can rely on them always. And I think good friendship, you should never take that for granted. And why this book was so important is because it was about friendships that probably would last a lifetime. And so it sort of explained to me a little bit about Afghanistan and what was happening, which was the reason why I read it, but also the fact that the friendships were so strong. I think that was really, really, and why it was such a good read for me.
These are books that have had an impact on our lives. But what about a book that you've enjoyed? And what books do you think are currently in the top 10 best-selling children's books of all time? The Harry Potter series became an international phenomenon when it was first published way back in 1997, so it probably won't surprise you to see that 6 of the 7 books made it into the top 10 best-selling children's books of all time, so far. But which Harry Potter book is missing? Yes, it is of course Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, which comes in at number 11. Love it or hate it, the Harry Potter series is responsible for getting millions of children reading the world over. The books have sold over 400 million copies worldwide and been translated into more than 60 languages. The midnight release of each magical book resulted in queues through the night of readers waiting to get their hands on the next title and sparked a multi-billion-pound movie franchise. But here's a fact you may not know. Joanne Kathleen Rowling adopted her pen name J.K. Rowling to be more neutral, as her publisher believed that this would encourage more boys to buy the book. Harry Potter is one of the best modern-day examples of books being made successfully into movies. In the history of world cinema, nearly half of Oscar-winning movies started as published books. And whilst it did not win Oscar for Best Movie, Joker made Oscar history by being the first comic book movie to lead in the nominations. Then there are, of course, hundreds of children's and young adult books converted into films that missed out on the Best Movie Oscar: The Hunger Games, Maze Runner, Divergent, and The Boy in the Striped Pyjamas, to name but a few. But our small screens also see their fair share of book adaptations. The successful transition from book to movie has been made by thousands of titles, and here are just a few examples of popular Netflix shows that started as books. Many of us have watched the adaptation of the Alex Rider series and are waiting for Robert Muchamor's Cherub series to finally start filming. So just think what we've been missing out on if these incredible books had never been written. So here's Mr. Benton to talk about the impact of reading a book can make.
I love The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby is described as perhaps the most supreme American novel. Ultimately, it's a love story. It's a love story about a young man who is not good enough for the young woman that he falls in love with, and she goes off and marries a much more powerful and rich man. So this young man reinvents himself and to make himself the kind of prince that the princess wants. Except it doesn't end in a happy ending after, it ends in tragedy and disaster. But it's about so much more than that. It's about the American dream, it's about corruption, it's about crime and how crime is accepted in society, it's about money, and there are just some great characters in it. And ultimately, it's just a fantastic story that at the end of it, you can't make up your mind about who you feel sorry for, who you like, who you didn't like, and who are the heroes and who are the heroines. It's just a great novel that leaves you asking lots of questions.
When you watch TV or see a film, you're looking at things happening to other people. Prose fiction is something you build up from 26 letters, you alone, using your imagination to create a world. Now, I'm a huge movie fan. Despite the argument made by many that books are better than movies and vice versa, there is definitely a time and place for both. But in 2022, we all have our screens that give us instant access to everything we need. What is the point of a book? Well, books are magical. Books are packed with knowledge. They teach you about hardships, about love, about fear, and about every little thing that's a part of life. And here's a couple of facts about reading you may not know. Now, Year 7 and 8 students always hear me talking about reading for 20 minutes. 20 minutes reading a day means you're reading on average 1.8 million words a year. And a study by Yale University in America shows that reading for more than 3.5 hours a week means you'll live a whole 2 years longer than people who do not read at all. But we're not born readers, and all of us come to books at different stages in our lives and for different reasons. So we asked your pals about their favourite books.
So when I was at school, I read To Kill a Mockingbird. It was a fantastic book, and the reason why I enjoyed it so much was because it highlighted all the injustices of the world. It was the first book I ever read that really made me think about how it was to be somebody else and how it feels to be somebody else, and I really enjoyed it.
Harry Potter, this one is the fourth one, and this was the very first one that I got on my 10th birthday. It's even written inside from my grandparents. Really, really special to me, and the reason why it is because I grew up with this. And it is my childhood. I was in Year 7 when the first film came out, and of course they were in Year 7 as well, so I grew up with the films as well, so an absolute favourite one there. I wrote a non-fiction as well. This one I read last summer, and is actually what part inspired me to run the Girl Up Club on Friday. Everyday Sexism from Laura Bates. It's very real, it's factual, it's statistics. You can't argue with the information that's shared here, and some real stories. Really insightful.
Okay, my favourite books, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I liked all the Harry Potter books growing up, but I remember this was the first one that had to wait to come out as a new book. So I remember I think I was in year 5, and asking my mum to queue up for me in the morning at WH Smith to get the book on the day it came out. I didn't want my friends to see me queuing up, but I finished it in about 2 days, and it's probably the longest book I've ever read, but loved all the Harry Potter books, but I remember queuing up for this one specifically, and waking up and couldn't put it down really. So yeah, excellent book.
Hello, so I've chosen 1984 by George Orwell as my book to talk about. I first read this book back when I was a teenager at school, and I loved it for a couple of reasons. First of all, it mentions my hometown Amersham, so it had a real sense of presence for me, but also because the story is very, very gripping. It tells the story of one man called Winston and his battle against a totalitarian state. It has a number of things that we see mentioned very frequently, even in today's media. Things such as Big Brother is this omnipresent person behind a screen watching what every single person does and says. Things like the thought police, policing what people say and what they do and what they think. Also famous oxymorons such as war is peace and freedom is slavery all come from this book. It was written in 1948 in a very, very different world to the one we live in today, but some of the lessons from it certainly do apply, particularly with the growth of things like social media, looking at what we say and what we do and recording it for posterity forever. So yeah, that's why I love this book, and urge you to give it a read.
So my favourite book and book series is Harry Potter. The reason why I love it is that you can immerse yourself in a completely different universe from our own. It's a universe you would love to be part of yourself. I love magic, and also the books are a lot better than the films.
Okay, so I've chosen the book Birthday. It's an important story that I read this half term. It tells the story of Eric and Morgan and their journey to self-discovery. And much like Noughts and Crosses made me really reflect on how someone might experience racism, this book's made me reflect on someone's journey to self-identity, and it was really moving for me to read it.
I always hear people say that reading a book is better than the film. So when The Life of Pi came out, I thought I would give it a go because I saw that it had won so many awards. And I can honestly say that this is true when it came to this book. I really enjoyed this book because of the relationship between Pi and the Bengal tiger.
So my favourite book is Not Tonight, Josephine by George Mahood, and it's about George, who is a student who's just finished university, and he is travelling from the east coast of America all the way to the west coast and back again with his friend. Unfortunately, his friend can't join him all of the way, so he ends up getting his girlfriend to come with him, who then becomes his wife later on in life. It's a really good, feel-good, funny story, and it's always one that's guaranteed to make me laugh.
Okay, my favourite book is The Hate You Give. Understanding systemic racism across the world and actually being able to sort of understand how to communicate between deprived neighbourhoods and those that are affluent surely opened up my eyes to this. And more importantly, I think a lot of our messages going forward is what's the point of having a voice if you're going to be silent when you shouldn't be? So opening up, going forwards and making sure that your point is heard.
So the book that I've chosen to talk about is The Happiness Advantage by Sean Aker. Now the reason I've chosen this book is because the research that he did and what he's talked about within the book is how instead of success leading to happiness, he's talked about how happiness can lead to success. And this is both within the workplace and within education. So what it's about is putting happiness at the forefront of everything that we do and how that this can then lead to greater success.
So whether you're reading from an iPad, a Kindle or a book, or your phone, graphic novel, magazine or manga, reading really sparks your imagination. A great book transports you from your surroundings. It blocks out all the noise. It suspends reality. It doesn't judge you, and it doesn't answer you back. We all read in one form or another, and we want to leave today with thoughts and reading from a celebrity who is a particular favourite of mine, and that you will all undoubtedly know the name of. Thank you all for listening.
I just never seen reading as something to do. If I was in the house, I was just sleeping. I'd go home to sleep, and then I'd wake up, go to school, and then just be on the streets again. So reading was just never part of my schedule growing up. But now that I have read, I want to make sure that the next generation have the opportunity to read.